Once, an older hearing woman said to me long ago, after I had been trying to explain about oralism and everything, she said, "Oh, you know, the first thing that oppression kills is creativity." And I was like, I don't know if that's true or not, but I was struck by the statement and I committed it to memory. My name is Paddy Ladd, and I'm from the country of England, specifically West England. My name sign is similar to the sign name for Jesus. The reason for that is some of the young deaf people saw the long hair, the sandals that I was wearing, and the beard, and they decided to give me that sign name. I vehemently discouraged it, but it was too late. It spread like wildfire, and they had a good chuckle over it. Anytime a group is oppressed, it means that their identity is compromised. They feel that their lives and their community is worthless, unimportant, and devalued. There are a number of ways to become empowered. There are political ways, spiritual ways, and the artistic way. With artistic empowerment, one's perspective and view of the world is written about creatively and is artistically expressed, projected for all to see. Others may come upon the works and say, "Oh, so that's a woman's gaze. I never thought of that perspective." So art can impact the other. Another impact art makes is when another woman looks at it, she may feel an affinity to it. She may have the experience of saying, "I thought women were insignificant, but now I see our importance." Similarly, with members of the black community, they may feel that commonality when their own experience is put down for all to see. White folks may say, "Oh, I see what you mean." Fellow black people, however, may also have the experience of identifying with the work on the level of understanding that this means that they can succeed and follow a similar path. It means they start toward examining who they are, what they're made of. This is a valuable step to begin to ask who one is related to the world at large and related to one's community. We see a similar process with deaf folks. What does it mean to be deaf? To some, it's a medical problem, a negative condition, and all of that stuff. Deafhood means who are deaf people and what does it mean to be deaf? Are we God's mistake or God's intention as part of the diversity of human beings? As part of God's intention, how do people process this new meaning of the deaf experience? Art is one very powerful way of examining and expressing what it means to be a deaf signing person in this world. We can create powerful artistic expressions for ourselves using such things as humor, storytelling, theater, art, and such things that actually record our lives. Hearing people's response is often, "I never thought of that." And deaf people's response is often, "I'm important. I'm worthy of having things created about my essence and about myself," so that becomes part of the liberation process. An important example related to this discussion would be deaf theater. Most deaf theater is hearing plays that are interpreted. And that's fine. It's a decision made by the producers, but I'm always asking, what about your own values and your own community? Why don't you write about that? Are you saying your life experience is not important? Now, those are questions that I'm always left with, and it leaves me feeling a bit frustrated. The deaf experience has been represented in American deaf theater, and there are 2 or 3 examples that I really cherish. They communicate our essence and what is important about being deaf. An example would be NTD's production called My Third Eye. There's a scene where they are mocking hearing people that demonstrates a real sense of self-confidence. They seem to be communicating, "I have a particular skill that they don't have. That's too bad for them." That idea of feeling sorry for them is important. That's one work I can think of. And Another important dramatic work is Tales from a Clubroom. I've never seen a production of it. I've just read the script, which was written by Bergman and Bragg. While I was reading the script, I immediately said to myself, yes, that is the deaf experience. The reason that play Tales from a Clubroom is so important is because it's set in a deaf club. Today, some people say deaf clubs are not vital to our culture anymore. But the British perspective is that deaf clubs are very important for carrying on traditions, continuity, passing on our heritage to new deaf youth who will enter the community and so forth. That play is just one of a few literary works that communicate our cultural experiences. Since that play, there haven't been many others. It should instill a sense of pride and a yearning for such an experience. But perhaps we still haven't convinced deaf people of its value. We can imagine that when deaf people see the clubroom play or something else about the community, they begin to see patterns and characters. There's recognition that specific characters are the same as you or just like me. They can start to question the representations and see themselves better, thereby gaining wisdom. For hearing people, hearing theater, that's a given. To see a play and then reflect and examine oneself. We're still operating on a superficial level. We haven't been introduced to that same depth and substance that allows us to examine ourselves. We don't trust our own deafhood. We're forever looking outward with our eyes at the hearing. It steals all of our energy to focus on trying to be the same as hearing people, trying to negotiate with them while ignoring our own center and essence. We need to be defining and focusing on our own deafhood. Another example of a play of the deaf experience that has impacted me would be Gil Eastman's work, Sign Me Alice. I've both read and seen the play. It's somewhat of a time-specific play making fun of signed English, but it is also a clever adaptation of a hearing play to fit the deaf experience. And that's an important type of work as well. Do I mean to say that we should hate all hearing plays? By no means. But we can glean through them in order to adapt relevant stories that parallel our experience to show to the world. I think Sign Me Alice is a good example of this type of adaptation, and it still seems popular because there are many productions. Often we talk of the different artistic expressions, but we don't discuss the audience involvement and what they take away from it, how they process these various works. The deaf community as an audience is still a bit tentative and insecure. And what I mean by that is in Britain we have a number of deaf artworks to which we give an automatic thumbs up. We feel we cannot criticize or evaluate deaf artworks. We just support and do the thumb up thing without any further analysis and progress. Of course, this is just the first step, creating works without permission to offer any critique or good, but my opinion is. We're not quite there yet. Unfortunately, the deaf community is not at the point yet to face those truths. An illustration of this would be the experience of folks getting together after a performance of Sign Me Alice and collectively exploring and discussing the meaning of the play. Like the journey of women in understanding and achieving confidence in themselves, we need this for the deafhood journey. We need to center ourselves to counter and ward off negative influences from the male gaze or hearing points of view. Ironically, I've just thought of a parallel with the play Children of a Lesser God. This main character is a woman who is deaf and she strives to resist the overpowering influence of a hearing man. I'm speaking in particular about the play, not the film adaptation. The movie sucked. It was just horrible. The play is very impressive because in the resolution, the woman leaves the man dumbfounded and helpless. This is a very powerful message. Now, related to sign language poetry, Dorothy Miles, my good friend, seemed to pave the way, at least from a British perspective. She was one of the first deaf people to say that poetic works could be created from deaf sign language. Initially, people laughed at her, brushed her off, and when she returned to England and performed her poetry, folks often paused, only briefly, to watch her performance with drinks in hand, and then they disregarded her and resumed their conversation. That was pretty tough. Which of her works has had the greatest impact on me? I'd have to say it's the Hang Glider. Now, you may wonder why this particular one. It's because when I watch it, I feel that it's a very deaf poem while also examining a very universal experience. It can resonate with each of us on various levels. Women can relate to that work in terms of what it says about confidence. In this, the poem describes standing on the edge, deciding if one should make the move, take the plunge, or consider the risk. At the same time, we know that deaf people have such fears, and it's due to our upbringing. So the work will resonate with us without directly stating deaf. That is the skill that many sign language poets offer. You don't have to raise the political flag overtly. If it happens, that's fine, but the subtlety of it adds layers of meaning and symbols. Here are my wings, and there, at the edge of nothing, wait the winds to bear my weight. My wings, so huge and strong, built with my life in mind. I have made other wings before, tested, tried, wing broken, and cast aside. I searched and asked and saw and built again. And here I stand. The interesting thing about Dot's work is that while it is very personal in nature, it has also served to inspire pride in our sign language. Many of her animal poems were created with culture of the deaf community in mind and deaf people's goals. She includes powerful nuances and facial expressions and so forth in her poetry. She also created some more blatant political works for specific political situations. For example, when the first college degree in British Sign Language was awarded, Dorothy Miles created a poem in honor of that event. Another poem Dot created for a specific event was for the British Deaf Association Centennial. It was titled BDA, Who You, Me United Will Fight for Equality. In this poem, the body movements and rhythm feel a bit like a rap construct to me. That poem is still often quoted today, so it's still being passed on. This illustrates how art can be political for different reasons. It has a power to encapsulate a message concisely, as opposed to a long-winded rhetorical speech. This packaging of the message allows people to absorb it faster. It is immediately grasped by the mind as well as the heart and the soul. That's another power of artistic expression. If we look at each genre, poetry, theater, film, TV, and storytelling, sharing our stories is an instrumental deaf tradition. These are forms that need not be influenced by outside forces. For example, there is very little influence from the hearing world in the art of ABC stories. That, for example, exhibits a deep celebration of deafhood and deaf artistic expression because it is unique to us, particularly as it exists in the U.S. as compared to the U.K. AB stories are very rich, and I'm fascinated with how that form developed and how members of the deaf community developed the confidence to create those works. The traditional form of AB stories emerged from deaf school settings, which appeared to inspire the creative process. In contrast, England doesn't have the same foundations for creativity and only a few stories in comparison with the U.S. We haven't really had the same literary depth or body of folklore that covers the deaf experience. That level of artistic expression is very overpowering. One thing that puts a bit of a smile on my face is to see the proliferation of deaf film festivals spread like wildfire across Europe, the U.S., and Canada. Deaf people are really zeroing in on filmmaking. This year there may be a few less feature-length films, but short films are taking off. Film is a medium in which we can literally show ourselves as deaf people and appropriately represent our lives and ourselves. There's a real fire about it. It's obvious to me that deaf people feel filmmaking is a significant medium in which to artistically express the deaf. In Mirzov's book, he shows that 19th century French deaf artists were significantly involved with deaf celebrations. The Paris Salon and numerous exhibitions of their work before oralism took over. After oralism, one of the impacts was that deaf people's artworks were completely shut out, and so their creativity faded. We see the same thing happening during our time. When oralism arises, deaf art fades away, topples over, and dies. When total communication or sign language was awakened in the 1960s, really the 1970s, deaf art woke up. There's an obvious connection between the reign of oralism with the suppression of deaf creative expression. There's an obvious causal relationship, yet no one discusses it. I feel it's very important that academics in the field of deaf studies zone in on the underlying dynamics at work and examine in depth the relationship between these movements and artistic expression. What happens when you kill a person's creativity? You kill something inside of them. They experience a form of psychological murder. Once, an older hearing woman said to me long ago, after I'd been trying to explain about oralism and everything, oh, the first thing oppression kills is creativity. And I was like, I don't know if that's true or not. But I was struck by the statement and committed it to memory. We need to explore this notion. Why would they kill creativity first? Well, creative people value themselves. If you don't have self-worth, you don't feel you have anything of value to share. You keep everything underground and hidden like the shared clandestine dormitory storytelling. When I lecture to my students in class, I always tell them, you have 10 years to build a mountain. Build it tall before the waves of cochlear implants, oralism, and mainstreaming crash upon us. If you take your time and are busy partying, not building up the mountain, then the waves will wash away the little we have amassed. However, if you build a political discourse through art and creative expression, you will be building an insurmountable mountaintop which the waves of oppression will not be able to dismantle. We will survive.